The cardboard box felt heavier than it should have, as I walked out of Midwest Automotive Parts for the last time. 32 years of my life packed into one banker's box, a coffee mug, some family photos, and a small plant Dorothy had given me for my desk back when she still believed in my future. I'm Gerald Thompson, 61 years old, and that Friday afternoon in February changed everything. The plant manager, some kid named Brandon, who looked like he'd learned everything about manufacturing from YouTube videos, had delivered the news with all the warmth of a computer printout. Gerald, we're restructuring due to competitive pressures from overseas suppliers. Your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Competitive pressures. That's corporate speak for the Chinese can make our parts for half the cost, and we'd rather collect quarterly bonuses than fight for American jobs. I'd seen it coming. Ever since Shanghai Precision Industries started underbidding us on every major contract, the writing was on the wall. They kept the young engineers with their fresh ideas about automation and lean manufacturing. They got rid of the legacy personnel, guys like me who remembered when automotive parts were built to last, not just to meet minimum specifications. The drive home through Detroit felt longer than usual. Empty factories lined the highway like broken teeth, reminders of what this city used to be. I'd spent my entire career in automotive manufacturing, worked my way up from floor supervisor to operations manager, thought I'd retire with dignity and a decent pension. Now I was just another casualty of globalization. Dorothy's Honda was already in the driveway when I pulled up. She'd gotten home early from her job as a school nurse, probably heard the news through the grapevine. Bad news travels fast in a town where everyone's connected to the auto industry somehow. She was waiting at the kitchen table when I walked in, still wearing her nursing uniform, looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with work. "Gerald," she said, not even asking how it went. Marianne Henderson called. She heard from her husband that Midwest was cutting senior staff. I set the box on the counter, suddenly aware of how pathetic it looked. Yep, 32 years, and this is what I have to show for it. Dorothy rubbed her temples. We'd been married 34 years, raised 2 kids, survived plant closings and recessions before. But this felt different. This felt final. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "I'll find something else." I always have. She looked at me with eyes that held no hope. "Gerald, you're 61 years old. Who's going to hire a 61-year-old plant manager when they can get someone fresh out of engineering school for half the salary?" That night, our son Kenneth called from his downtown office, where he worked as a data analyst for an insurance company. At 32, he made more money pushing numbers around spreadsheets than I ever made managing 200 people, and millions of dollars in equipment. "Dad, I'm sorry to hear about Midwest, but honestly, this might be an opportunity. The automotive sector is dying anyway. Everything's going electric, automated, digitized. Your experience is valuable, but maybe it's time to think about transitioning to something more sustainable." Transitioning. Kenneth had learned that word from the career coaches who helped his company right-size their workforce last year. Like what? I don't know. Consulting? Part-time project work? You could take some courses, learn about modern manufacturing systems, Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence applications in production. Artificial intelligence. Like I was some obsolete machine that needed software updates to function in the modern world. Our daughter Patricia called the next day from her social media management job across town. At 29, she had strong opinions about everything and the vocabulary of someone who'd learned about life from LinkedIn inspirational posts. "Dad, you need to view this as a pivot opportunity. The market has shifted toward digital natives and adaptive skill sets. It's not about your experience anymore. It's about your ability to demonstrate growth mindset and technological fluency. Digital natives. Growth mindset. She talked like a motivational speaker who'd swallowed a business textbook. Patricia, I've been adapting to new technology for 30 years. When computerized inventory systems came in, I learned them. When automated quality control replaced manual inspection, I mastered it. But Dad, that's incremental adaptation. What I'm talking about is fundamental transformation. You need to rebrand yourself for the modern economy. Rebrand myself. Like I was a failing product that needed better packaging. The job search started the following Monday. I updated my resume, highlighting my achievements, increased production efficiency by 23% at my last position, reduced waste by 31%, improved safety metrics by 40%. Numbers that should have meant something to someone. But the phone didn't ring. The emails went unanswered. When I did get responses, they were form letters thanking me for my interest and wishing me luck in my future endeavors. After 3 months, I finally started getting interviews. The pattern was always the same. Initial phone screening went great. They loved my resume, got excited about my experience managing complex supply chains, solving production bottlenecks, leading teams through equipment failures and deadline crises. Then came the in-person meeting. The moment I walked into those conference rooms, I could see it in their eyes. This guy's older than we expected. Gray hair, reading glasses hanging around his neck, probably set in his ways. The interviews became exercises in polite rejection. "We'll be in touch," they'd say, already knowing they wouldn't be. By May, Dorothy had started picking up summer sessions at the school district, working extra hours to keep us afloat. The severance, money was almost gone, and our retirement savings were looking more like survival funds. "Gerald," she said one morning over coffee, "maybe it's time to consider accepting that the market is telling us something. Maybe God wants you to try something different." God. Dorothy had gotten more religious since I lost my job. Started going to that big church downtown where they preached about accepting your circumstances as divine will. Apparently, losing your career after 32 years was part of some cosmic plan. Different like what? "Stanley found work at 63, she said, referring to my older brother who lived in Grand Rapids. "Part-time at Menards, helping people in the hardware section. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work." Stanley, my brother who'd spent his career selling insurance policies and now wore a red vest explaining the difference between drywall screws and wood screws to weekend warriors. That was my future, apparently. That afternoon, I sat in my garage workshop, staring at the tools I'd accumulated over the years. Diagnostic equipment from my factory days, woodworking tools for weekend projects, a classic 1987 Camaro that I'd been restoring when time allowed. Everything covered in dust since February. For the first time since losing my job, I felt something other than desperation. I felt angry. I'd spent my entire career solving problems. When production lines went down, I fixed them. When quality metrics dropped, I figured out why. When new regulations came in, I adapted processes to comply. I was good at it. I took pride in it. And now everyone was acting like I was some relic from a bygone era who couldn't understand that machines could talk to computers. So I decided to prove them wrong. It started with curiosity more than revenge. I wanted to understand what was really happening in modern automotive manufacturing. Why were we losing contracts to Shanghai Precision? What were these digital natives actually doing that was so revolutionary? I drove to the Detroit Public Library downtown, not to apply for jobs online. I'd given up on that futility, but to research. In the technology section, I found books about artificial intelligence in manufacturing, industrial Internet of Things, predictive maintenance systems. I started reading, not because Kenneth and Patricia thought I should update my skills, but because I genuinely wanted to know. What problems were these fancy systems actually solving? What I discovered was fascinating and infuriating at the same time. All this cutting-edge technology everyone was so excited about, Machine learning algorithms, IoT sensors, predictive analytics. They were trying to solve problems I'd been dealing with for 30 years. Predicting when equipment would fail, optimizing production schedules, coordinating supply chains, managing quality control in real time. The technology was impressive, sure, but it wasn't magic. It was pattern recognition, data analysis, automated decision-making. Things I'd been doing manually for 3 decades, just faster and with more sensors. But here's what frustrated me. These systems were making predictions in isolation. The predictive maintenance algorithm would flag a bearing replacement, but it didn't understand that replacing that bearing on Tuesday would shut down the line during our biggest delivery of the month. The inventory optimization software would calculate perfect stock levels, but it didn't know that our supplier in Ohio always shipped late during hunting season because half their warehouse crew took vacation. That's where experience came in. That's where guys like me had value that no algorithm could replicate. I started spending entire days at the library, then checking out technical manuals to read at home. Dorothy thought I was having some kind of breakdown. She'd find me surrounded by textbooks at the kitchen table, scribbling notes about manufacturing execution systems and industrial automation protocols. What is all this, Gerald? I'm trying to understand something. Understand what? You're 61 years old and unemployed. Maybe it's time to focus on realistic options instead of playing student. Playing student. Like learning was some luxury I couldn't afford anymore. The breakthrough came in June. I was reading about electric vehicle battery manufacturing, Detroit's big bet on the automotive future, when I realized something important. EV production had all the same coordination problems as traditional automotive manufacturing, but amplified by 100. Battery cells, thermal management systems, electrical components, software integration, everything had to work together perfectly, and a failure in any subsystem could destroy the entire product. The companies rushing into EV production were drowning in data, but starving for insight. They had sensors monitoring every aspect of battery cell production, but no good way to coordinate that information with assembly schedules, quality control protocols, and supply chain logistics. It was a coordination problem, and I'd been solving coordination problems for 30 years. That night, I set up my laptop in the garage workshop next to my half-restored Camaro. I'd been avoiding this space since losing my job. It reminded me too much of being useful. But now I cleared off my workbench, mounted some whiteboards on the walls, and started mapping out an idea. What if you could create a system that didn't just predict individual problems, but understood how those problems affected everything else? What if predictive maintenance schedules could automatically coordinate with production plans? What if inventory algorithms could factor in predicted equipment downtime? What if quality control systems could anticipate problems based on supply chain disruptions? It wouldn't just be predictive, it would be adaptive. A manufacturing nervous system that could think like a plant manager. I started teaching myself Python programming through YouTube videos. Not the fancy computer science stuff, just practical coding for data analysis and system integration. My lower back ached from hunching over the laptop, and I needed reading glasses to see the screen clearly. But I was learning. Kenneth came by one Saturday morning and found me surrounded by cables, connecting sensors to a Raspberry Pi computer, testing data collection from an old pneumatic press I used for hobby projects. Dad, what are you doing? Learning how IoT sensors actually work. He looked around the garage, whiteboards covered with flowcharts, notebooks full of handwritten code, the Camaro pushed to one corner to make room for my makeshift laboratory. Are you building something? Maybe. Dad, you know you can't just invent a job, right? That's not how the economy works. Economy. Kenneth had learned to see everything through the lens of market forces and employment statistics, isn't it? Patricia visited the following week and had similar concerns. Dad, this looks like you're having some kind of midlife crisis. Maybe you should talk to someone, a therapist or career counselor. This whole mad scientist thing isn't healthy. Mad scientist. Like curiosity and determination were symptoms of mental illness. But I kept working. I had nothing but time, and for the first time in months I felt alive. Not just hopeful. Alive. Like someone had plugged me back into the electrical grid. The system I was building focused on electric vehicle battery production coordination. I used publicly available manufacturing data, combined with everything I knew about automotive production workflows, to create algorithms that could balance multiple optimization objectives simultaneously. Traditional manufacturing software tried to optimize one thing at a time, maximize throughput, minimize inventory, reduce downtime. But real production was about managing trade-offs. Sometimes you accepted higher inventory costs to ensure on-time delivery. Sometimes you scheduled maintenance during peak demand if the alternative was catastrophic failure during your biggest contract. My system understood these trade-offs because I programmed it with 30 years of plant management experience. By August, I had a working prototype. It wasn't pretty, mostly command line interfaces and basic visualizations. But it worked. I tested it against historical data from automotive plants, seeing if my algorithms could have made better decisions than what actually happened. The results were remarkable. My system could reduce unplanned downtime by 35%, optimize inventory levels to cut carrying costs by 28%, and improve overall equipment effectiveness by 18%. More importantly, it could do all of this simultaneously, balancing trade-offs between different objectives in ways that individual optimization systems never could. That's when I decided to test it in the real world. I called Howard Miller on a Wednesday morning in September. Howard had been my colleague at Midwest Automotive before leaving 3 years earlier to start his own consulting firm. We'd stayed in touch, mostly complaining about how corporate America had lost its soul, but he was one of the few people who still treated me like I knew something worth knowing. Gerald, good to hear from you. How's retirement treating you? I'm not retired, Howard. I'm building something. Building what? A solution to the coordination problem that's killing American manufacturing. Long pause. You want to grab coffee and tell me about it? We met at a diner near the old Ford Rouge plant, surrounded by guys who looked like us, experienced, unemployed, forgotten by an economy that worshipped youth over wisdom. Howard listened while I explained my system, showed him the test results on my laptop, walked him through the algorithms I'd developed. Gerald, he said finally, this is either brilliant or crazy, maybe both. I need to test it somewhere real, somewhere that matters. Howard leaned back in his booth, studying me like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. You know what? I might have something. There's a company in Toledo, Precision EV Components. They make battery thermal management systems for electric vehicles. Family-owned, about 120 employees, drowning in data and losing contracts to overseas competitors. What's their situation? Linda Rogers runs it, inherited from her father, trying to keep 120 families employed in a market that wants to ship everything to China. They've got decent equipment, good people, solid processes, but everything operates in isolation. Sound familiar? It sounded exactly familiar. They can't afford the big consulting firms, but they're desperate enough to try something unconventional. Want me to make a call? 3 days later, I was walking through Precision EV Components with Linda Rogers. She was about my age, had that look of someone fighting a battle she wasn't sure she could win. The plant was exactly what I expected. Good people working hard, decent equipment running efficiently, but no integration between systems. Production planning didn't communicate with maintenance schedules. Quality control data sat in isolated spreadsheets. Inventory management was done manually by people who'd been doing it the same way for 15 years. They were manufacturing thermal management systems for Tesla, Ford, and GM, but coordinating it all like it was still 1995. "We're generating more data than we know what to do with," Linda told me as we walked past a CNC machining center. Every machine spits out performance reports, but nobody has time to analyze them or figure out what they mean for the big picture. "What's your biggest problem?" "Delivery schedules. We can make quality parts, but predicting when they'll be ready is like throwing darts blindfolded. A bearing fails on line 2, and suddenly we're 3 weeks behind on the Ford contract. That's when I knew my system wasn't just theoretical anymore. Give me 90 days. Let me show you what's possible. What's your approach? I'm going to teach your machines how to think like a plant manager." Those 90 days at Precision EV changed everything. Not just for them, but for me. I installed IoT sensors throughout their facility, connected everything to cloud-based processing I'd learned to set up through YouTube tutorials and online courses. But more importantly, I programmed their data to think like someone who'd run production lines for 30 years. The first breakthrough came in week 3. My system predicted that the main hydraulic press on line 2 would fail within 48 hours based on pressure fluctuations and temperature patterns. But instead of just flagging it for maintenance, the system calculated the optimal repair window during the natural production gap between their Ford and GM orders, minimizing downtime and avoiding delivery disasters. Linda Rogers watched the maintenance crew replace the failing pump exactly when my system predicted, during a 6-hour window that saved them 3 days of unplanned downtime. "How did you know?" she asked. I didn't. The machine told me. I just taught it to think about consequences. By month 2, my system was orchestrating their entire production flow. It knew that delaying one small order to prevent a quality issue would allow them to fulfill 3 larger contracts on time. It understood that running maintenance during second shift instead of first shift would keep their most experienced operators on critical jobs. The results were extraordinary. Precision EV cut unplanned downtime by 38%, reduced waste by 29%, and improved on-time delivery from 71% to 92%. More importantly, they started winning contracts they'd been losing to Chinese competitors. "Gerald," Linda said during our final review meeting, "whatever you built, it's not just software. It's like having the world's best plant manager working 24/7. That's when Howard Miller made the call that changed my life. "Gerald, I've been watching the numbers from Precision EV. What you accomplished there is impossible. Nobody improves. Manufacturing performance that much that fast. It's not impossible. It's just coordinated thinking instead of isolated optimization. Can you do it for other manufacturers? Scale it up?" The principles are universal. The implementation details vary, but the core logic applies to any complex manufacturing operation. Howard was quiet for a moment. "Gerald, I think you've built something bigger than you realize. I have contacts in the manufacturing technology sector, investment firms, acquisition specialists. Would you be interested in exploring options?" Options. For 8 months, I'd had no options. Now suddenly the world was opening up. Meanwhile, at home, Dorothy had stopped asking about my garage projects. She was working summer school sessions, picking up extra hours wherever possible, quietly preparing for a future where I might never find real work again. Kenneth and Patricia called occasionally, but the conversations were strained. Everyone walking on eggshells around the unemployed dad, who was clearly struggling with reality. On Halloween night, while Dorothy handed out candy to trick-or-treaters, I sat in my garage putting finishing touches on the documentation that would change our lives. Tomorrow, I had a video conference with Apex Manufacturing Solutions, a Chicago-based company that specialized in industrial automation technology. They'd spent 2 weeks reviewing my system design, studying the Precision EV case study, asking technical questions that proved they understood exactly what I'd built. I was about to find out if 8 months of work in a garage workshop could really compete with Stanford PhDs and MIT graduates. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda Rogers. Monthly numbers are in. Best performance in company history. Whatever happens with your next steps, you saved my business and 120 jobs. Thank you. I turned off the garage lights and headed inside. Tomorrow would either validate everything I'd been working toward or confirm that I really was just an unemployed old man playing with computers. The video conference with Apex Manufacturing Solutions lasted 3 hours. Dr. Sarah Martinez, their CTO, and CEO Richard Foster grilled me on everything: technical architecture, scalability challenges, market potential, implementation timelines. I answered every question, drawing on 32 years of manufacturing experience that suddenly felt incredibly valuable instead of obsolete. Mr. Thompson, Dr. Martinez said finally, what you've created isn't just an improvement to existing manufacturing software, it's a paradigm shift. You've solved the integration problem that's been plaguing industrial automation for decades. Their offer was stunning. Complete acquisition of my technology platform for $1.8 million, plus a 5-year consulting contract at $150,000 per year, plus performance bonuses that could total another $3 million if the system performed as projected across their client base. But the real validation came when Richard Foster leaned toward his camera and said something that made me understand how fundamentally wrong everyone had been about my value. Gerald, I want you to know something. We've been trying to solve this exact problem for 6 years. We've hired MIT graduates, Stanford PhDs, consultants from every major firm. They all failed because they were trying to optimize individual components instead of understanding manufacturing as a living system. You succeeded because you think like a manufacturer, not like a programmer. I signed the preliminary agreement that afternoon. The announcement would go public on December 20th, strategically timed for maximum industry impact before the holidays. I drove home in a daze. For 8 months, my family had been treating me like damaged goods, someone who needed to accept diminished expectations. In one morning, I'd become a millionaire, and proven that experience wasn't obsolete. It was invaluable when combined with determination and modern tools. But I didn't tell anyone. Not Dorothy, not Kenneth, not Patricia. What would I say? Hey, remember how you all thought I was wasting time in the garage playing with computers? Well, I just revolutionized manufacturing optimization and got rich doing it. Instead, I went to my workshop and kept refining the system. Apex wanted to begin implementation across their client base in January, and I wanted everything perfect. Dorothy barely noticed my improved mood. She was working double shifts to cover our mortgage payments and had started talking seriously about selling the house, moving somewhere smaller, accepting a reduced lifestyle for our remaining years. Kenneth called with more career advice about realistic options for men my age. Patricia sent articles about successful career transitions in retail and service industries. They meant well, but every conversation reminded me how completely they'd written me off. The announcement went live at 9 a.m. Eastern on December 20th. Manufacturing Today ran it as their lead story. Industry blogs picked it up within hours. My LinkedIn notifications started going crazy. And then, at exactly 10:23 a.m., everything changed. Kenneth called first. His voice was different, confused, almost panicked. Dad, what the hell is going on? My LinkedIn feed is exploding with posts about you. I could hear the shock, the way his voice cracked like when he was a teenager who'd broken something expensive and was afraid to confess. What posts? Manufacturing Today, Industrial Innovation, Weekly, Forbes Manufacturing. Dad, they're all talking about something called the Thompson Adaptive Manufacturing System. It says you sold it to Apex Manufacturing Solutions for... His voice dropped to a whisper. Dad, it says $1.8 million plus consulting fees. I sat down at my kitchen table, The same place where Dorothy had told me to stop pretending anyone would hire me. It's real, Kenneth. Silence. Then. But how? When? We thought you'd given up. Given up. Those words hung between us like smoke from an explosion. I never gave up, son. I just stopped trying to convince everyone I still had value and started proving it instead. Patricia called 15 minutes later. She was at her office, and I could hear the buzz of activity in the background. Dad, my boss wants to know if I'm related to the Gerald Thompson who just made national manufacturing news. My coworkers are asking for introductions. Dad, they're saying you might have changed the entire industry. I combined 32 years of experience with modern technology, Patricia. Turns out that's a pretty powerful combination. But we had no idea what you were working on. You never asked. You just assumed I was having trouble adjusting to irrelevance. Dorothy came home early from school. Someone in the main office had congratulated her on her husband's achievement after seeing it shared on social media. She walked into the kitchen, where I was sitting with my laptop, reading interview requests from industry publications and universities wanting me to speak at engineering conferences. Gerald. She stood in the doorway like she was afraid to come closer. Dorothy. Is it true? Everything they're saying online? It's true. She sat down across from me, in the same chair where she'd suggested I accept that God wanted me to try something different. Why didn't you tell me? When would I have told you? Between your double shifts? During one of our conversations about accepting reality and transitioning to retirement. She started crying. Not angry tears, but the quiet, devastating tears of someone realizing they'd made a terrible mistake. I thought you were lost. I thought you were hiding from the world in that garage, playing with computers instead of facing facts. I was building the future in that garage, Dorothy. I was solving problems that billion-dollar companies couldn't crack. But all you saw was an unemployed old man who couldn't accept his circumstances. That evening, Kenneth and Patricia came to the house together. For the first time in months, we all sat around the kitchen table where this whole journey had started. Dad, Kenneth said, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my respect, which I should have given you all along, not because you made money, but because you're my father and you've earned it. Patricia was studying printouts of articles about my technology. Dad, what you built, my marketing clients would kill for this kind of breakthrough innovation. You didn't need to rebrand yourself or adapt to the market. You needed us to stop being idiots. Yes, I said simply. You did. How long have you been working on this? Kenneth asked. Since the day I realized that all these digital natives everyone worships were trying to solve manufacturing problems without understanding manufacturing. They had the tools, but not the wisdom. And you had the wisdom, but not the tools, Patricia said. So you learned the tools. I combined experience with technology instead, of seeing them as opposing forces. The months that followed were surreal. Apex's stock jumped 18% after announcing the acquisition. Manufacturing companies I'd never heard of called about licensing deals. Universities invited me to guest lecture on industrial innovation. Kenneth asked if he could help with data analysis for the system rollout. Patricia wanted to develop case studies showing the technology's impact. Dorothy started taking basic computer literacy classes at the community college, trying to understand the world I'd been living in. On Christmas morning, exactly 10 months after I'd lost my job at Midwest Automotive, we sat together as a family. The same kitchen where Dorothy had told me to accept my diminished circumstances. The same garage where I'd built something that would change an industry. Kenneth pulled me aside after breakfast. Dad, I need to tell you something. All right? When you first got laid off, I was secretly relieved that you weren't working at Midwest anymore. I thought you were stuck in the past, unable to understand how business worked now. He paused. I was embarrassed to have an unemployed father when all my friends' dads had successful careers. The honesty was brutal and necessary. I was wrong, he continued, not just about what you were capable of, but about what success looks like. You didn't just find another job, Dad. You created something that experts said was impossible. You proved that wisdom plus determination beats youth plus arrogance every time. As I sat there with my family that December morning, I understood something profound. The real victory wasn't the money, or the industry recognition, or even the family reconciliation. The real victory was learning that transformation doesn't mean abandoning who you are. It means refusing to let others define your limitations. Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come not from those who grew up with new tools, but from those with enough experience to know what problems are truly worth solving. And sometimes the most important lesson is this. When the world tries to convince you that you're obsolete, the answer isn't to accept their verdict. It's to prove them wrong by building something they never imagined possible.